Your brain can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And I know that sounds like an outrageous statement, so let me explain. But before I do, just a little bit of framing for this video. If you've been following me, we've been moving through my somatic spiral, which is a 5-pillar framework made up of nervous system regulation, self-compassion, deep listening, somatic parts work, and deep imagery. And deep imagery is where we're going to go today. Now, deep imagery, in my opinion, is the one that gets the least play. People talk about it the least, and I think it's really one of the most powerful practices we can use for nervous system regulation and for generally sort of building capacity. So let me talk about that a little bit. Now, deep imagery probably gets the least attention in the somatic world, but I think it's truly one of the most powerful practices we can work with to strengthen our nervous system and to build capacity. And I think that deep imagery often doesn't get a whole lot of credit because it's seen as make-believe, which brings me back to my original outrageous statement that your brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening in your imagination and what's happening in real time in your experience. Yes, you know the difference between your imagination and something that's happening between you and someone else. But what stays the same is that your brain lays down neural pathways, whether something is happening in your imagination, in your emotions, in your thoughts, or whether it's happening out there in the world. So when you imagine a scenario, your brain is laying down neural pathways as though it's actually happening. And here's why that is so important and can create such an amazing nervous system regulation practice. So here's why working with your imagination can be so helpful. Remember that anytime you do something new, your nervous system goes on to high alert, right? It's always predicting whether you're going to be safe or not. And so anything new creates another level of alert in your system, which is why we get more nervous when we do something new. So if you rehearse it, if you practice it in your imagination, you again start to lay down those neural pathways. It becomes more familiar. It is no longer something that is completely new. So let's say you're going to give a presentation. That can be nerve-wracking. You can feel nervous about that. In fact, I have a good example from just a week ago. I was at a family party and I was asked kind of at the last minute to make a speech. And I had basically a car ride to consider what I might say. So I did give some thought to what I wanted to say, but what felt most important to me about the speech, because it was a casual speech and it didn't have to be polished, what was most important was that I could bring feeling to it. And so in my imagination, I didn't just think about what I might want to say, but I thought about how it would feel to say it. I felt the feelings in advance. And then when I got up in front of my family to say what I wanted to say, it already felt a little bit familiar. I had already practiced this in my imagination. I practiced the part of me that might get some butterflies. I noticed where I might feel a little tense or where I might feel a little nervous. I practiced that experience and made my way through it. So then when I stood up in front of the group, I had a different level of confidence and comfort because I had gone through it in my imagination. Now, admittedly, that's a bit of a softball, right? I had to give a speech for my family with people who love me and whom I love, right? So it wasn't a high level of discomfort that I experienced. But what if I had to give a presentation? What if I had to have a difficult conversation? We all have those difficult conversations that we play over and over in our head. This is a little bit different. Instead of just ruminating on the conversation, telling the story, we think about what we want to say. We think about how we want to feel when we say it. So if I rehearse a difficult conversation in this kind of imagination way using deep imagery, I'm going to notice what's happening. I'm going to notice if I'm starting to get nervous. I'm going to notice if there's clenching in my jaw or a tightening in my throat. I'm going to notice what's happening in my belly. And so as I rehearse, I notice that somatic experience. And what I do is then bring in my nervous system regulation tools. I bring in my self-compassion tools. Even as I'm imagining what I want to say, I'm noticing my feet on the ground. I'm encouraging a longer exhale. I'm bringing in a friendlier tone that says, "You've got this." I'm working with all of these pillars as I'm rehearsing. So you can see how, yes, it's a deep imagery experience, and I'm working with practicing something difficult so that it becomes a little bit easier, so that I lay down those neural pathways that makes the experience more familiar once I get to it. But I'm also bringing in those other pillars. I'm also bringing in these layers of relaxation and self-compassion that will also help me to move through the experience with a little more ease. So again, when you want to practice this, you bring in the imagined experience. That's step one. Step two, you notice the somatic experience. And step two, you offer any tools that might make that somatic experience a little bit more easeful. And this is the somatic spiral in action. Working with a deep imagery practice, for example, and then leaning into some of the other pillars when you need a little bit more support. You can do this with anything, something that feels easy, something that feels difficult. But again, if you're trying something new, recognize that any newness can push you out of that window of tolerance and move you into dysregulation. And so when you know that there's something on your plate that has that potential, try this deep imagery practice and see if it offers some support. So if you'd like to practice with me now, get a little bit more comfortable. So if you'd like to practice with me now, you can make your way into a comfortable seat or really any shape that allows you to relax a bit. And as always, when we're moving into a meditation practice, you'll start by getting a little bit more grounded. So give yourself a moment to feel the places in your body that need support. Maybe that's the connection between your feet and the floor. Maybe it's your seat and your chair, depending on the shape. Just let yourself settle into that support a bit. Especially when we're stressed, we tend to hold ourselves up away from the support. We brace muscles that don't need to be used. So notice the way that you might be over efforting a bit. And as you take the next few exhales, try to let go of some of that effort. And if there's a way of breathing that could make you a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more relaxed, maybe a longer, slower exhale, maybe an inhale that drops a little bit lower into the belly. Just find a breath that feels nourishing and relaxing. And then take a minute to invite in something challenging. Maybe it's a difficult conversation that you've been meaning or wanting to have. Maybe you're trying a new activity, something that feels a little scary. Maybe there's something you have to do at work, a presentation or a project. Just bring in something that feels challenging. And once you've identified something, bring it into your imagination, the experience of it, what it might look like, what it might feel like, the kinds of things you want to say or do, and just start to kind of conjure the experience. And notice what, if anything, arises in the body that tells you that you're a little uncomfortable. It could be some tension or bracing, a shift in your breath, a feeling like you don't have the words. Just notice what actually comes up in a somatic way that leads to a little bit of discomfort. The beauty is that this is happening in your imagination, so you don't have to rush to find the right words. You can pause from what you're doing or saying and bring in a little bit of ease, whether that's coming back to noticing the feeling of support beneath you, to taking a more relaxed and nourishing breath, or to bringing in a little self-friendliness, just kind of a general tone of you've got this or it's going to be okay. And once you've brought in a little bit of that self-soothing, go back to imagining the scenario, what you want to say, how you want to feel, what you want to do. And if you get stressed or tongue-tied, go back to some of those tools, your breath, the support, self-friendliness, whatever is soothing. Give yourself a little more time just to work with the scenario, to notice the kinds of things you want to say or do, and how you might do that while still feeling grounded, while still feeling relatively relaxed. And as you move at your own pace, you can complete the practice anytime you like. And while I might be wrapping up this practice, you can stay with it as long as you like. If you'd like to explore deep imagery and the rest of the somatic spiral with me, I'll be offering another round of the somatic immersion this fall. You can click the wait list below. Thanks for practicing with me. I'm Rachel. Subscribe for more somatic healing practices and nervous system regulation tools.